In this video, I will be showing you how to replace an alternator on a 2002 Nissan Xterra 3.3. On my Nissan Xterra, the alternator is actually buried way down below the air conditioning compressor. So the whole idea here is to go ahead and take off a few things up on the top, unbolt the air conditioning compressor with the lines attached, and hopefully just pull it off to the side in order to have access into the alternator. As you can see, it's down there quite a ways. And here is a picture of my alternator that I purchased on eBay for less than $100 free shipping. This is an 80 amp alternator. Now before you buy your alternator, verify and make sure that you are buying the correct amperage for your Nissan Xterra. As you can see, it is very nice looking, and this is probably the last time we'll ever get to see it again because, like I said, it's buried pretty low on the side of the engine block. And here is a quick look where I purchased mine. Of course, it was on eBay. This is a OEM alternator. If you're going to put an alternator on a vehicle and it's very hard to get to, my best advice is to go with an OEM. That way you won't have any problems down the road. And second is, if you buy a cheaper alternator, you may end up with radio interference, some kind of noise, electrical noise. So OEM is always better to go, especially on these Nissan Xterras. Go ahead and disconnect the positive battery terminal from the battery. Put it off to the side. So now let's begin by disconnecting this sensor on the air box. Put this out of the way. And secondly, the two sensors on the throttle body. Disconnect these and put these off to the side. And then pull our clips back on our two hoses by the distributor and go ahead and pull this off. Sometimes these can be a little tough to get off. There's that one. And we'll pull this one, push this off to the side. Loosen the clamp on the throttle body. Next, loosen this clamp on the air box. And once you get that loose, go ahead and pull this back just a little bit. Verify that it is loose. Disconnect the brackets holding down the air cleaner box. Pop the bar. And now we'll go ahead and pull this up and out of the way and take your right hand, grab this tube on this side, and slowly wiggle this off and pull it off of the intake. Most of the time, this little air piece here, our box will stay here, but we'll pull this out of the way to give us a little better access. And off to the side we go. Go ahead and remove the air cleaner. Obviously inspect it. It's probably going to be dirty like mine. We'll replace it later. Next, go ahead and get this air box out of the way. And if yours is like mine, the seals are probably pretty dry and it should slide right out. Sometimes you have a clip right here that you'll have to pop off this little grommet for the wiring harness. And now we'll pull this out of the way. And now is a great time to go ahead and remove our support hood rod because this will be in your way. So the best thing to do is go ahead and just slip it out of here now. And we'll put this on the other side or simply use something else to prop the hood up with. So we'll take that out. And there it is. We'll simply just prop it on the passenger side of the hood. Next, go ahead and remove these three bolts that hold down this air box, the bottom part, because what we'll do, we'll take this completely out, and this should give us enough room to kind of flip our air conditioning compressor over in this area to give us a little more room. But if you're like mine, if you live in the Northeast, mine are a little rusty, so we'll go ahead and put some oil on them, kind of lube them up a little bit, help them break off. And there are all three of my 10mm bolts. If you live in the Northeast, you'll probably have to fight a little rust, but lube these up the best you can on the bottom, and they do break loose a little bit easier. And now we'll pull this box out of the way. And now we have a lot more room in this area here. Next step, go ahead and unhook this compressor wire. Put it off to the side. On the back of the air conditioning compressor bracket, there is a 10mm bolt that we have to disconnect. This holds the dipstick housing in place. Also, there is a ground that goes there. Of course, mine is broken off. We'll replace this later. And there it is, and also there is the ground housing that goes with it. We'll fix this later. And to verify that the bracket is free, just simply pull up on that bracket and push it off to the side. And now it's time to go ahead and take off our air conditioning belt, which is right here. Take a 14mm wrench and go ahead and break this nut loose on this pulley. On the top, we have to break this bolt loose here. This is a 14 millimeter. We will simply go ahead and break this off and turn this several turns until the belt becomes sufficient enough to be loose and to slip it off of the pulley. There, that should be great. And now we'll slip our belt off and just put it off to the side. And it should be fine for now while we do our job. Next, we'll go ahead and take our breather tube off. This is a 10 millimeter bolt, because when we pull the air conditioner up and out of the way, one of the hoses may hit against it and get caught. So there that is, and there's the bolt. We'll put this out of the way. Now on the fender, there is an emission system here with a wire. Let's go ahead and take this, get this out of the way, because when we lift this compressor up and try to just push it out of the way, the main line here might hit this, and we don't want to take a chance of breaking anything, so let's get this off. Alright, so there are those two bolts, and now we'll just simply push this back out of the way, and this will let this flex a lot more so we don't do any damage to it. And then if you want, just put the bolts back in. That way there's no chance of misplacing them, dropping them, or trying to figure out where they actually go. And now is a great time to take a little piece of wire and go ahead and put around the bolt hole of this dipstick tube housing bracket, because a lot of times it'll slide down all the way down close to the engine. You'll have all this back together and you'll realize this is way too far down and you won't be able to get it back up without saying some words you really don't want to say. So we'll go ahead and stick this on here, and now we won't have a chance of losing this or letting it slide all the way down toward the engine. Next step is to go ahead and take off these four 14 millimeter very long bolts that hold the compressor on. The two on the top, we will take those out last, because those two will keep that compressor nice and snug against this bracket. The two on the bottom take a little time. They are a 14 millimeter, and I'm using a little socket with an extension, small like extension, probably about 1.5 inches, and a little swivel. And when we take out the first one here, this line might be in your way a little bit. You can move it just a tiny bit if it's a problem. But basically, I'll put my hand under here like this, find that bolt with my fingers, and go ahead and make sure the socket is on there. And go ahead and give it a nice tug. And there it comes loose. And now I've disconnected my ratchet, and now I can just simply turn this with my fingers. It makes it a little bit faster, and that way, if it gets into a bind, you can actually feel it. Okay, there's our first bolt. And like I said earlier, by leaving the two top ones tight, it really helps these bolts here from not going into a bind when the compressor likes to shift around. So that one's out. Okay, so we got that bolt out of the way on the bottom. Now the one on the bottom back side, I'm using a deep well with a 14 millimeter socket, and the best way to get this bolt is to stand basically by the fender, put one hand down here to feel the stud of that bolt, the head of it, and just simply put your ratchet on there like this. And this is a little bit easier to get to. Simply go ahead and break it loose. And now we should be able to put our hand down there and eventually go ahead and fish it out. Like I said, it's a little tight, and you may have to try different positions to get your hand down there, but I can feel the bolt. And let's see if I can turn it just about, not quite. We'll have to continue just a little bit more. And that should be enough. Okay, and with a little wiggling and spinning, and out comes our bolt. So there's that one. And now we'll go ahead and break the two top ones. And believe it or not, this is probably the hardest part of the job, is getting this compressor out of the way. I've seen some guys take this shroud off in the front, but there's still absolutely no room to get your hands in there. And I like to be able to see what we're doing, especially when we're working on the alternator. So this way here, once this is out, it will give us access visually to see that. So let's get these bolts out. Okay, so we've got them out as far as we need them right now, and go ahead and verify that it's loose. And now, and get you an old cloth towel, an old rag or something, and kind of lay it over here off the side. That way we don't scratch up our body too much. And this will give it something to kind of sit in and cushion in so it doesn't bang around too much and won't move around, and it'll have something to kind of grip onto. And we'll continue taking these bolts out. Put one hand under the air conditioning compressor to kind of help it there a little bit. There's that bolt that's very long, and also one more bolt on the front. And you see our compressor is loose. And the beauty here is we do not have to disconnect any of these lines. We don't have to worry about recharging the system up later. Now we'll grab it, lift up on it, and eventually just kind of pull it out of the way right there. And like I said, you can move it around a little bit. The lines do flex, but don't flex it too much and don't bend any of the lines. We should be fine just right there. And there, my friends, there is the alternator. How much easier is this? Just to get in here, and you have room here now to get to these wires and unhook everything and take off the two bolts. And that should make our job a lot easier. Next, on the alternator, we have to take a 12mm wrench, and I like to use these ratchet wrenches. It makes it a lot easier. There's a bolt on the front, an adjusting screw, and there's one on the back. We have to loosen these up just enough to go ahead and loosen our belt up. Alright, so there comes that one. It's a little tight there, but we just need to loosen the front of this up just a little bit, just about 4 or 5 turns. And we got one more on the front there, and this one is a little hard to see. If I put my hand right about there, you can probably see where the wrench is. And all we got to do is turn this several times in order to get that belt to come loose. And now our adjusting bolt is loose, and we can go ahead now and slip this belt off. You can leave it just hanging there on the bottom of the pulley, no problem. Next, on the back of the alternator, go ahead and pull this plug out. It's a little difficult. You got to push on that tab, but once you do that, that should come out. And next, we'll be taking our main wire off on the back. And on the back of the alternator, if you pull this little boot up right here and put a 12mm wrench on the back, you'll feel a little nut. So go ahead and take this nut off and pull this cable off. And once you feel that the bolt is really, really loose, take your fingers and just simply go ahead and twist that nut off with your fingers, because you do not want to lose this nut. There that is. And there is not a secondary washer there. There's a look at the nut. So put this off to the side. Now on the back of the alternator, we have one more wire going down to the back of it there with a little 10mm bolt that we have to take off. And it's pretty easy to get to. Grab you a little 10mm, put it on the back of it. And this one does not have a boot on it, so should be fairly easy to take off. And you can see where the wrench is right there. And now, go ahead and break it off. Take it loose. And now, out it comes. We get this bolt out, and that is all the bolts except the two that are holding the alternator in place. So there is that one, and you can see. Don't lose that. I think you can see it there. There we go. And now, on the very bottom of the alternator, you see that bolt there sticking out. Adjustment bracket that goes into the alternator. We just go ahead and pull this off the side, take it off, and get it out of our way. And just for now, we're going to take the bolt and put it up here off to the side. And now we've got two on the top to take out. One is right there. It's very difficult for me to actually get that light perfect for you guys. And you can see, if I shine the light, you notice where my finger is, it's right there. So I'll take my 12mm wrench, stick it down here. It's a lot easier than it looks, believe it or not. And we'll go ahead and take this one out. And then the one on the back, it will allow us to go ahead and take this alternator out. Alright, so the front bolt is just about out. You might want to put your hand on the bottom of the alternator and kind of move it around a little bit. It just helps it to free up that bolt. And there is this bolt. It is now out, and there is a look at that one. And now we've got one more bolt, and it's on the top of the alternator, and it's kind of hard to see, but it's easy to get to right about where my finger is. Just stick your wrench down in there, 12mm, and go ahead and get that one loose. Easy peasy. And I think by now we can put our hand under here like this, and go ahead, spin the bolt out with our fingers. Go ahead and finish, take the bolt out. And now our alternator is ready to come out. So we'll put this bolt off the side. These two bolts are unique. They go on the top of this alternator, so don't get those messed up. Don't mix them up. And now, out comes the alternator. it is loose. And now you can see our alternator kind of resting there, and you're thinking, oh, let's grab it and pull it out of here. But wait, there's more. You can't get this out. What we have to do now is one more step. We have to take this bracket here off. There's really no way to maneuver this alternator around these power steering lines, around the exhaust, or the steering wheel shaft. So no big deal. All bolts are very easy to get to. We'll just simply pull this out of the way and pull the alternator out. All right, let's get these guys here out of the way. These are 12 millimeter. These go on the front of the bracket. Get those out of the way. And on top of the bracket, we have a 12 millimeter bolt we take out, but it's not too bad to get out. And there's a look at it. Put this off to the side. All right, so there's that one, and here's a look at all the bolts. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 smaller bolts, and we got this one long one which goes on the top. Put these off to the side, and now you're excited and you're ready to take this off, but you're like, what gives? It's not coming off. Why is it moving? Oh no. Well, there's one bolt that is hidden that gets everyone. And the one bolt that gets everyone is a cover bolt that's in the front of the engine here that goes right into the side of that bracket. But now we have to take it off. It's very small, just a little tiny thing. It's part of the timing cover, and I believe it is out. And once you take it out, you gotta watch that bracket just might fall down, so I've got my hand on one end just in case. And now out comes the bolt, and there is the cover. Dust cover, like I said, it gets everyone. Now, voila, out comes this big, heavy bracket, and it is heavy. All right, and here's a quick look at the bracket. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is where the shorter bolts are. On the side, you got these two little bolts there that go in the side of the bracket on the front. And that one annoying hidden cover bolt, now it's not this hole here, it's the one down here, the smaller one. This is where the front cover bolt's into. So now, you know. And now we can reach down in here and pull this alternator out. There it is. Finally. It is a good alternator, so I figured I might as well just replace it because I put a brand new starter on it, and I can have this one for a backup or just simply sell it to somebody who needs an emergency alternator and maybe make 40 bucks. And on the right is the old one, and on the left is the new one, of course, and everything matches up. The old one is an Hitachi. This new one here is a genuine Nissan alternator, which it says on the back here. All the plugs are good. I'm happy, and it looks like our job is going to continue here without much problems. Hey, let me know where you're watching from right now. Okay, now the fun begins. We get to reassemble everything and put it back in the vehicle. So take the old alternator, look at the back of it, and this applies to any alternator. Verify that all the bolt holes are going to be the same bolt holes in the back of your new alternator. For instance, here is a small bolt. I know where this one goes, and we have a big nut right here. And on the back of the new alternator, we'll go ahead and put this bolt in. Verify that it goes in okay, because there's nothing like getting this alternator down there and finding out that you've cross-threaded the bolts or bolt, and put a little oil on it, and we're good to go. So now we can go ahead and drop this in and start reassembling everything in the reverse order. One thing I like to do sometimes, if there's room, I like to put a towel or a cloth in the bottom and drop the alternator. Let the alternator rest on this, that way you don't scratch it up or damage it. And it also gives us very easy access to turn this a little bit, so we can see to go ahead and start a bolt with that ground wire. And as you can see, we got our hot wire connected, right? And our ground is connected, so we're good there. We just snug those bolts down for now. We'll torque these down once we get the bracket on to the alternator. And now we'll go ahead and reassemble our bracket. All right, the alternator's on. We got our bracket on. Everything went into place just like it should. The best advice I can give you on that bolt, on the hot wire on the back of the alternator, use a little socket like this, a 10 millimeter. It makes it a lot easier to get to. Then when you're done, push this cap over that. You got your plug wire. Also, the ground wire is tight. And also be mindful, there's that little wire that comes up from the oil pressure sending unit. It does tie into this bundle here, so be careful not to break that. The alternator is bolted on. We got our brackets on the front. We got our two bolts on the top on. Real easy to do, and you can see it's loose. All we got to do is tighten the two top bolts up and the bottom bracket. Put the belt on, and this alternator is bolted on there, so it worked out really well. At this point, our alternator is on. We got our belt tight. All the adjusting bolts are good. Two top bolts are tight. The one in the bottom, the ground wire and the hot wire is tight. Everything checks out. The belt is just about where you want it to be. You don't want it real tight. Maybe move it up and down a ½ inch or so. That's about it. And at this point, you can either be proud of yourself and say, hey, I saved $550, or B, you paid somebody else and you lost $550. Which is best? At this point now, we can go ahead and put our air conditioning compressor back on, hook up a few small things, maybe try to figure out that ground wire we were talking about earlier. Other than that, this job is almost done. So let's go ahead and bolt this on and finish this up. Now, something noteworthy, you see this wiring harness right here. Sometimes they actually have a bracket on here that actually bolts to this mount right here that goes to this alternator. So sometimes you have to take an extra bolt out here and put it back in just to hold this wiring harness in place, but mine doesn't have it. I worked on it earlier. I just didn't put it back on because there's really no need for it. So other than that, it's on really well. So just be mindful of that. At this point, we got our belt on. It's a tight, just like it should be, adjusted just right. Also, we got some nice ground strap here going back on the bottom here where we took off earlier that was broken. The air conditioning compressor is all hooked up, and we are just about done. And just like that, it's all back together. We even got our little piece up here on that we took off earlier. I checked everything, double checked. This is the key to a successful fix. Take your time. Get tired, walk away, have a little drink, come back, and you'll feel refreshed. Double check everything before we start everything up. And finally, we get our battery cable nice and tight, and we are ready for our first start. All right, guys, here we go. Here's our first start. I'm a little excited, a little nervous, but let's do this. Okay, she sounds great. Oh yes, and look at those bright headlights. I love it when a plan comes together. And as you can see, we are charging. No alternator lights on. The lights are nice and bright. I am really happy we finished this job up. It only took about 4 hours by taking my time. Alright guys, so I've double checked everything. She's nice and warm. Everything is working perfectly. And like I said earlier in the video, you'll never see this alternator again. If you look closely, you can kind of see it down there. But hey, it's done. Like, subscribe, and share. And until my next video, I will see you later.